Hello, my name is Angel Chapple, and you are now tuned in to the very first episode of Truth Be Told. Yes, this is like a spinoff of my first series that I did titled Sunday School Lessons, where I talked about African American contributors to this world. We'll continue to bring more hidden figures and their contributions to society to the light, as well as discuss politics and social issues of today, but providing you an alternative in contrast to what we see in mainstream media now. So you're in for a treat. I'm very, very excited that you decided to tune in. And so let me just get right into it, okay? So our first story is going to be about the first African American car manufacturer. Yes, everybody should have this book in their home, and I will provide a link and information to where you can order this book. But when I say this book needs to be in everybody's home, I mean it, okay? This is the first Black autos, and this book was written by Henry A. May. Henry A. May is a descendant of C.R. Patterson, who was the first Black automobile manufacturer. One of the things that is so remarkable about Mr. May is he was an educator for over 30 years. And just out of nowhere, he had a conversation with his, I believe his mother, who spoke about time that she spent with the family, and she talked about a factory and making cars, and so he became curious, and upon his curiosity, he did research and talked to more family members to come to find out and learn that this existed, that he was part of the lineage of a great man who in times past was great competition to what was then Ford company. And so one of his frustrations was that he couldn't really find a lot of information about Mr. Patterson. And he digged and digged and digged, and ended up going to Ohio, where he was able to find, some news clippings and things of that nature. But there wasn't a whole lot of information. Can you imagine that? So guess what he decided to do? He decided to write the story. Something I would like to pinpoint here is that so many times we go around, we're trying to find answers, or we're trying to find solutions, and we forget that in the midst of finding that, we ourselves can be part of the solution. And I'm so thankful that Mr. May decided to write this book, because had he not done it, hey, I wouldn't be able to share this with you guys right now. So let's jump right into the story. Mr. Patterson, Charles Richard Patterson, he was born in 1833 on a plantation in Virginia. So his parents were slaves, and he was born into slavery. And he watched his parents work sun up to sundown every day of the year, with nothing to show for it. And so at an early age, he decided that this is not the life that I want for myself. And so during his time on the plantation, part of the skill set that he picked up was fixing on carriages and buggies and doing repairs. Unfortunately, the owner made lots of money off of Charles Patterson. So much so that word got around about how well he was at doing things, and people would come near and far for him to fix their buggies and things of that nature. And so after the time that he spent working alongside the blacksmith, and he had built this skill set, he decided that he was going to use his skills for himself. Found out that a war was about to break out. Of course, this was the Civil War during that time. And he made the decision that he was going to leave. And he left not even telling his mother and his father of his intentions. Nobody knew, but they knew midday that they had not seen him. They had an instinct that he was gone. But he left. Can you imagine not telling your mother or father goodbye? Imagine how tired he could have been, and how much he wanted a taste of freedom to take the risk of leaving with nothing. He had nothing. All he had was his set of tools with him. Not a dime, just his tools. But he made a decision in his mind that I'm going to take my skill set and I am going to make something of my life. All right? And that's what he did. And so he left, and of course I don't think any of us can really put into words the journey. We've seen, movies related to what it was like for, slaves that ran away. But to physically travel, I imagine it was daunting. And I imagine the paranoia, and I imagine him having to be on his toes, during the night, so that, he's not caught, and resting during I can't imagine, right? Hiking mountains in the area. This is Virginia. I'm not from Virginia, but this is Virginia up into Ohio is where he did settle, right? And so, he had to go through mountains, crossing a river, okay? And one of the things that is so peculiar, he didn't know how to swim. But what he did know how to do was use his skill set to create a raft to get him across the river. And that's what he did. He took two large trunks, put them together, and he got across the river. Imagine how many slaves before him who tried to run away but weren't able to make it across the river and probably drowned. But he made it. And the author notes that once he arrived to his destination, that a feeling of warmth came over him. And he described that feeling as his family having received unction that he was safe. Can you imagine? There is something that I want to share with you. I think this is profound. The author includes a poem here by Langston Hughes titled "The Negro Speaks of Rivers." I want to read this to you. It says, I've known rivers, ancient as the world and older than the flow of human blood in human veins. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. I bathed in the Euphrates when dawns were young. I built my hut near the Congo, and it lulled me to sleep. I looked upon the Nile and raised the pyramids above it. I heard the singing of the Mississippi when Abe Lincoln went down to New Orleans, and I've seen its muddy bosom turn all golden in the sunset. I've known rivers, ancient, dusky rivers. My soul has grown deep like the rivers. And so I think it's profound because he talks about the history of having seen and known the rivers from times of ancient Egypt, and now here in the Mississippi and the Ohio, and almost as if he conquered them before, so it was nothing now. Even though he had arrived to his destination, he still had to be on the lookout for slave catchers and patrolmen at that time, because a resource for them to being able to pick up any black man, woman, or child and taking them somewhere and, receiving earnings for that. So he had to be on the lookout even still after coming along through that treacherous journey. Can you imagine? But let me tell you this, he didn't waste no time. Once he was further north, there were people that he was able to come in contact with who were abolitionists, who were against slavery and did assist blacks during that time, fighting for their freedom and for their rights. And so he went around and was asking for work. He had a skill set. He said, I ain't got no money. Hey, it's time to hustle. And that's what he did. He was able to work for a company where he was basically doing the same thing that he was doing on the plantation. So much so, he was well advanced and his work ethic was so good that they ended up promoting him and put him in charge over not just black but whites as well. I wonder how that must have felt for him. What an accomplishment to escape slavery, and within a couple of years' time, you're being promoted among, black and white, So he was able to make money and save money to rent, a cottage. Eventually he did meet a woman and he married her and they began to have children. And around this time as well is when the Emancipation Proclamation had been delivered by Abraham Lincoln. So relieved because, he no longer had to hide and duck and dodge or whatever about, him having escaped slavery, because technically he was a free man, achieving all of this success so much, his name grew around the town, and he and a white gentleman had went into a partnership together, and they made buggies and cars and trucks. And so he's continuing to use his skill set for himself, and he's able to provide for his family. And that's what he said he was going to do. And let me pause here for a moment. I have to pause here for a moment because, and I'm going to try not to get emotional. I have to pause here for a moment because he didn't know what was ahead of him. He didn't know that slavery was going to end. He didn't know that the Emancipation Proclamation was going to be read. He didn't know if he would be able to find a job. He didn't know if he was going to be captured along the way, if he was going to make it or not. But he made a decision in the dark. He made a decision while he was in bondage that I am going to use my skill set for myself. I am going to make something for my life. I am going to turn nothing into something. And yet, many of us today, facing the challenges that we face, will literally sit on our hands, on our skill sets, on our dreams, on our purpose, on our passions that have been placed down on the inside of us to create wealth, and having a little bit more of advantage than what he did. And yet we wade in our emotions and we do nothing. Nothing. And yet he had nothing but his tools and a desire for something better for himself. Left his family, took a risk, made a sacrifice, said, you know what, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm willing to die trying to see what's on the other side. Look at what he achieved. And that's not all of the story, but that is what I'm going to leave you with today. I want you to think about this. Think about this and how you can take and apply the same strength and power and determination of an ancestor to your life, to get up and move out of the bondage that you are in today. My name is Angel Chapple. Thanks for tuning in to Truth Be Told. Please check back with me again next week to hear the remainder of the story.